You can end the speculation about who's going to be replacing Billy Napier as Florida's next head coach, at least for one more season, because Florida's athletic director, Scott Strickland, put out a press release saying how Billy Napier, regardless of how things transpire to end this season, he's going to be back as Florida's head coach in 2025. They've seen enough progress over these last couple of weeks that they're confident rolling with him as the head coach of this program for at least one more season. This is really puzzling because Florida has turned their season around tremendously these last couple of weeks. We all remember when they got splattered at home by Miami and Texas A&M. But ever since those two games, Florida has played some of their best football under Billy Napier. They took care of business against UCF and Kentucky. They almost came close to pulling off an upset win against Tennessee on the road. And they played Georgia pretty tough despite losing some of their best players, including star quarterback DJ Lagway. But yet Florida was still competing to the very end with the third-string quarterback. And it's been really impressive how different this team has looked the last month compared to how they looked the first month under Billy Napier. It seems like him and that coaching staff have made some adjustments that have panned out. And next season, Florida is going to have a lot of talent that comes back. They already returned 70% of their offensive production and 66% of their defensive production from last year's team. And a large reason why they don't want to fire Billy Napier is because, for one, a lot of their NIL money, 70% of it, according to Pete Thamel, is tied to their freshman and sophomore players that Billy Napier has recruited. So they're banking on keeping Billy Napier around so those players don't transfer out. That money that they gave them doesn't go in vain, and that they can continue to develop with Billy Napier at the helm for one more season in 2025. You also don't have to run the risk of losing DJ Lagway, who was your prized possession from last year's recruiting cycle. He was the number one rated quarterback out of high school last year, and he's played pretty well in replace of Graham Mertz, who's out for the season due to an injury. And if Florida's ever going to be able to turn the table and get back to what they used to be, DJ Lagway is going to be a big part of that. And the biggest reason why it makes sense for Florida not to fire Billy Napier right now is because you got way more to lose firing him than you have to gain getting rid of him. Because first of all, if you were to fire Billy Napier after this season, his buyout is $26 million. That would be the second largest buyout in college football history to get rid of a coach since Texas A&M paid $76 million to cut ties with Jimbo Fisher. It also would cost Florida $40 million to transition from Billy Napier to whoever they hire as their new head coach and bring in their new staff. So there is a lot financially that Florida would lose. And it just really isn't beneficial for them to fire Billy Napier right now. If you fire him in 2025, if things don't work out, the buyout is less, and it gives you a little bit more money to allocate when it comes to finding your next head coach. Rather, if you do want to be aggressive and you go after a Kurt Signetti or a Lane Kiffin, you got more money to do so. It just isn't financially feasible for you to do it right now. And the recruiting for Florida has been a little bit disappointing because you're recruiting around the same range that Dan Mullen was, around that 11 to 13 range. But the difference is Billy Napier's recruits are actually seeing the field. They're actually being developed. A lot of Dan Mullen's recruiting classes, the guys would get to campus and you wouldn't really hear too much of them since. So for Florida, just keeping Billy Napier for a fourth season, yeah, it was something that disgusts Florida fans because you want to see results. And if you had a better coach like a Lane Kiffin with the talent that you already have this year, maybe you're in a better situation. But, you know, it just isn't smart for you to lose so much financially and hurt yourself when it comes to hiring a new head coach because you don't have enough money to get any of the top candidates out there. So I don't see anything wrong with giving Billy Napier one more year. This season has kind of turned around a lot for him with how well they've played. And if you keep things close with Texas, you can pull off upset against LSU, Ole Miss, and take care of business the final week of the season against Florida State. Possibly you end up going 6-6 and you make it to a bowl game. And although, that isn't what the standard should be at Florida, bowl games aren't the standard. The standard is to compete for an SEC title and a national championship every year. At least you would know that there's signs that this program is heading in the right direction. And with this new age of college football, with the impact of conference realignment pretty much making the SEC equivalent to what the NFL is, because the discrepancy in talent between the elite teams in the middle of the pack and the bad teams isn't as wide as what it used to be a decade ago. And we've seen it with teams like Vanderbilt having good seasons, beating Alabama, Tennessee getting upset by Arkansas. You got to be a little bit more patient with these head coaches. You just can't give them 3 years and then cut them off and bring in somebody else. Eventually, you're going to have to wait at least maybe 4 or 5 years suffering of disappointment to eventually have that guy in his 4th, 5th year actually be able to crack the code and turn things around. Because it's not like Billy Napier inherited an entirely great situation. People forget that Florida's NIL backing wasn't that good when Billy Napier first arrived. They weren't really willing to put out the necessary money needed to get some of the big-time recruits out of high school and in the portal. So Billy Napier has had to slowly reconstruct this program brick by brick. And in year 4, that means there's no more excuses for him. The expectation isn't to win 6 games in 2025 with him staying around. The expectation should be you get us to the SEC championship or a spot in the 12-team college football playoffs, because you're going to have a veteran roster, guys who you recruited out of high school, you developed. This is your team now. You don't have any more of the Dan Mullen guys, okay? You can't say that Dan Mullen gave you a crappy situation when you're 4 years in. All those guys on the field that are getting these snaps are guys that you recruited. You've had 4 years to implement your vision, and now it's time for your vision to be noticed by the entire world. If Florida can't win 9 games or more next season, Billy has to go. But we're in the new age of college football now where you can't just give a guy 3 more years. Okay, you got to give a guy at least 4 seasons to prove himself. Not everybody is Kurt Signetti or Kalen DeBoer. Certain programs, aren't constructed the same way that others are. You don't know the hurdles that Billy Napier has had to overcome to get Florida at a competitive level compared to a guy like Kurt Signetti. Indiana has money. They put a lot of money into basketball. They just don't put the same money into basketball as they do football. Kurt Signetti has changed that. So I'm not going to write off Billy Napier yet. I do like what I've seen out of this team the last couple of weeks. He has shown a little bit of some promise with how this team has looked. And you don't want to lose DJ Lagway. And it also hurts you putting out this kind of money to fire somebody when you could fire him for way less and have more money to use and try to steal a top head coach from a different university. Because when you hire a guy like Lane Kiffin, not only are you paying him, but you also got to pay the university because you got to buy out his contract. That is a detail that a lot of college football fans often overlook when it comes to these coaching moves. Like these coaches just can't up and leave without having to, make some sacrifices. And the thing is, they don't have to pay that sacrifice, which is that money that they got to give back to the university that they end up getting hired by pays that money for them. So I think that this is a smart decision by Florida. And the last time I can recall a decision like this being made where you give a guy who hasn't shown progress in his first 3 years another opportunity to turn things around was Nebraska with Scott Frost. They gave him 5 years and nothing really good came out of it. Hopefully, this Billy Napier situation ends with a better tune. Give your thoughts in the comment section how you feel about Florida giving Billy Napier 1 more season to right the ship, Do you think he'll be able to make the most of it, or do you think we're going to end up having the same conversation we expected to have about him, just a year prolonged? Are we prolonging the inevitable? I guess time will tell. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you get notified every time we drop new content and when we go live. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Link down in the description down below. And I will see you guys shortly with another episode.